What if I told you the biggest mistake in human history was farming? It sounds absurd. After all, farming gave us food, cities, civilization, everything. But what if that so-called progress came at a devastating cost we've been ignoring for 12,000 years? When humans first put seeds in the ground, they didn't just grow crops. They planted the roots of inequality, disease, war, and endless labor. Early farmers worked harder, ate worse, got sicker, and lived shorter lives than the hunter-gatherers they replaced. Sedentary life brought overcrowding, malnutrition, and plagues. Grains could be stored, and anything that can be stored can be owned, controlled, and taxed. From that surplus came hierarchies, property, kings, and empires. And by the time anyone realized what was lost, it was too late. We had built a world too complex, too crowded, and too dependent to ever turn back. This video isn't just about the dawn of farming. It's about the silent trade-off that still shapes how we live, work, obey, and dream today. Because maybe, just maybe, civilization didn't lift us up. It locked us in. And once you see the full picture, you might never look at a field of wheat the same way again. Chapter 1. The deal we never signed. 12,000 years ago, without a vote, a debate, or even a conscious decision, humanity made a deal, not signed in ink, but sown into soil. A silent shift began in scattered corners of the planet, almost unnoticeable at first. Small groups of hunter-gatherers, tired or tempted, paused their endless wandering. They stayed. They planted. They waited, and without realizing it, they crossed a threshold that would reshape everything. How we live, how we eat, how we work, how we suffer, and how we die. It was the birth of agriculture, a system that promised stability, predictability, and control. But behind that promise was a trade-off so profound, so irreversible, that we're still living in its consequences. Before this turning point, life was unpredictable but flexible. Diets were varied, movement was freedom, and most decisions were collective. There were no landlords, no borders, no clocks ticking above our heads. People moved with the seasons, left their waste behind, and lived in small, mostly equal groups that adapted as nature demanded. But once the first seed was sown, something else took root. Not just crops, but hierarchy, permanence, and control. Grains could be stored, and anything that can be stored becomes countable. What can be counted can be distributed. What can be distributed can be taxed. And once there's tax, someone must collect it. Someone must guard it. Someone will inevitably claim more than others. From those first baskets of surplus grain came the first concepts of ownership, debt, punishment, and power. The wild freedom of the forager gave way to the rigid rhythm of the farmer. Plant, harvest, store, repeat. Every season tied you tighter to the land. Every child born became another hand for the fields. More children meant more mouths to feed. More mouths meant more land to claim. And more land meant more borders, more conflict, more blood. The cycle didn't pause. It accelerated. Populations swelled. Entire landscapes were cleared, tamed, fenced. The wild wasn't wild anymore. It was property. We built walls to protect that property, and when walls failed, we built weapons. And when weapons failed, we built states. War didn't erupt as a flaw in the system. It became the system. And all the while, we called this progress. We tell ourselves that cities and writing and math and monuments were worth the price. That the trade of freedom for order, of movement for permanence, was a necessary step forward. But what if that story is upside down? What if farming didn't elevate us, but slowly enclosed us? What if civilization wasn't a ladder, but a web, one that trapped us the moment we touched it? Because the truth is, we didn't just settle on land. We settled into a way of life we couldn't easily escape. With every new field came the need for more labor. With every new mouth, the margin for failure shrank. Eventually, there were too many people, too little wild land, and too much to lose. Going back wasn't an option. Not because it wouldn't have worked, but because the system we built was designed to make us believe we had no choice. And even now, thousands of years later, the skeleton of that decision holds everything up. Today, we don't till the soil with our hands. We log data with our fingers. But the pattern remains. Our cities are vertical villages. Our offices digital farms. Our calendars are the new harvest cycles, and our screens are the new sun. We still obey rules no one remembers writing. We still live inside boundaries drawn by people long dead. We still wake, work, eat, sleep, not because we must to survive, but because the system demands it, and we tell ourselves it's better this way. That this is what advanced looks like. But sometimes progress isn't forward. Sometimes it's deeper into the trap. So the real question isn't, why did we start farming? It's, what did we lose the moment we did? Freedom? Equality? Health? Peace? Maybe all of them. And what we gained, growth, complexity, power, came with costs we still don't fully understand. Because what began as a way to feed ourselves became a machine that consumes us instead. A beautiful system, a brutal system, a permanent one. Maybe civilization wasn't our greatest invention. Maybe it was just the most convincing illusion of safety we ever told ourselves. Chapter 2. The hidden costs of stability. If the invention of farming was humanity's quiet revolution, then its consequences were anything but quiet. Once we rooted ourselves into the ground, it wasn't just the world around us that changed. It was us, our bodies, our minds, our relationships, even our myths began to transform. And for all its promises of abundance, agriculture came with costs that early humans could not have predicted. And modern humans have mostly forgotten. Take health, for example. Before farming, the average forager ate a wide variety of foods: fruits, nuts, leafy greens, wild meats, roots, insects, a nutritional mosaic shaped by diverse ecosystems. But once agriculture took over, diets narrowed. Suddenly, entire communities became dependent on just a few crops: wheat, barley, rice, maize. These storable grains were efficient to grow in bulk, but nutritionally shallow. Protein intake dropped, vitamin deficiencies spiked, and with settled life came crowded living, breeding grounds for infectious disease. Archaeological evidence shows a dramatic increase in bone lesions, tooth decay, stunted growth, and early death after the agricultural shift. But the impact wasn't just biological, it was social. In small hunter-gatherer bands, there was little room for hierarchy. No one could hoard food or land because everything was shared or left behind. Leadership was fluid, respect was earned, and mobility prevented any one person from becoming too powerful. Farming, however, created the first permanent surplus, and with it, the first true inequality. Some owned land, others worked it. Some stored grain, others starved. As food became property, so did people. Slavery, class, patriarchy all gained a foothold in the fertile soil of early farming societies. Women, once central providers in foraging life, were increasingly pushed into domestic roles, their labor rendered invisible but essential to this new economy. Children became labor assets. Families became production units. And the more land you had, the more people you could control. The logic of farming was relentless. Produce more, feed more, grow more, control more. But growth was not optional, it was required. One bad harvest, one missed rainfall, and famine loomed. Scarcity bred fear. Fear bred hoarding. Hoarding bred violence. War became normalized, not for defense, but for resources. Entire civilizations rose and fell based on who could farm better, store better, fight better. And with each collapse, the survivors didn't return to foraging. They built again, higher and harder. Cities emerged, bureaucracies followed, writing was invented, not for poetry, but for tracking grain. Math developed, not to understand the stars, but to count taxes. Even religion began to change. Gods were no longer spirits of rivers and animals. They became rulers of harvests and rain, divine enforcers of agricultural order. Obedience became sacred, and nature, once something we danced with, became something we conquered. Slowly, generation by generation, the memory of another way of living faded. Farming didn't just rewrite our environment, it rewired our values. Productivity replaced adaptability. Ownership replaced access. Time itself changed. Foragers lived in rhythms, seasons, migrations, cycles. Farmers lived by clocks, planting dates, harvest windows, deadlines. And we, the descendants of this shift, still carry that ticking in our heads. Work hours, school bells, calendar blocks, schedules carved deep into our sense of self. But perhaps the most tragic cost was psychological, the illusion of control. Agriculture gave us a false sense of mastery over nature. We tamed rivers, bred crops, fenced land, and declared victory. But nature never surrendered. It simply adapted. Soil eroded. Plagues returned. Ecosystems collapsed under monoculture. And now, in the age of industrial agriculture, climate collapse and ecological exhaustion, we are witnessing the long arc of that first decision finally curving back toward us. It's not that farming was evil. It was brilliant, even necessary in certain moments, but it came with trade-offs, and those trade-offs weren't small. We didn't just invent agriculture, we invented a machine that demanded more than it gave. More time, more labor, more obedience, more sacrifice. And it hasn't stopped, it's just changed shape. Today's farms may look like servers and spreadsheets, but the logic remains. Growth at any cost. Control over cooperation. Stability over freedom. We inherited this system without question, and we've optimized it beyond recognition. But in that optimization, what parts of our humanity have we left behind? What wisdom did we abandon in the soil? And are we still willing to pay the price for a deal we never truly understood? Chapter 3. The Beautiful Cage. We like to think we're free, that we choose our lives, shape our paths, design our futures. But the truth is, we're still living inside the invisible walls built by that ancient decision to farm. The tools have changed. Spears became spreadsheets, plows became platforms, grain silos became cloud servers. But the logic hasn't. The same cycle continues: produce, store, scale, repeat. And like the early farmers who could no longer walk away from their crops, we've built systems so vast and interlocked that escape feels impossible. Jobs, mortgages, passports, pensions, algorithms, deadlines, all the modern scaffolding around our lives is designed to keep the machine running. And the machine is hungry. Every day we produce more than we need, consume more than we should, and call it progress. But what if it's just acceleration, not direction? Look around. We're wealthier than ever, yet anxiety and loneliness are epidemics. We have infinite information, but shrinking attention. We're connected to everyone, but deeply isolated. Why? Because the core engine driving it all was never designed to make us happy. It was designed to make us productive. And we've optimized for that so aggressively we've forgotten what we were optimizing from. The forager lived with limits, but those limits created balance. The farmer chased surplus, and that chase has never stopped. Now even our identities are harvested. Our attention is monetized. Our desires are algorithmically sculpted to keep us consuming. We no longer need kings to tax us. We willingly offer up our data, our time, our focus. And what's more chilling? We defend the system. We fear its collapse. Just like the ancient farmer who clung to his fields during drought, convinced there was no other way, we cling to careers, cities, schedules, convinced this is the only real life. But deep down, a memory stirs, a restlessness. We dream of cabins in the woods, of unplugging, of escaping somewhere simpler. That's not just nostalgia, it's ancestral memory. For 95% of human history, we lived differently. Not easier, but freer. More connected to each other. More in rhythm with nature. More present. But the modern world teaches us to dismiss that as fantasy, romanticism, primitive nonsense. And yet we instinctively feel the loss, the long hours, the concrete boxes, the fluorescent lights. Something in us remembers a time before routine replaced ritual, before extraction replaced reciprocity. We scroll for connection. We work for freedom. We spend to feel whole. But what if the very structure we're inside is the thing preventing it? What if the real rebellion isn't escaping to the past, but imagining a future that escapes the pattern? A future not built on infinite growth, but on balance, on cooperation, on remembering that we are not separate from nature. We are nature. That we are not cogs in a machine. We are storytellers, creators, wanderers. The trap of civilization was never just physical. It was psychological. It made us forget we had a choice, that we still do. Because the truth is, we're at another turning point. Climate chaos, AI acceleration, economic instability. The machine is wobbling. And the question is no longer, can we go back? It's, can we go forward differently? Can we build systems that don't exploit but regenerate, that don't isolate but reconnect, that don't demand more but value enough? It won't be easy. Nothing truly revolutionary ever is. But revolutions don't always need fire. Sometimes they begin with remembering, with questioning the script, with daring to believe that the cage we live in, this beautiful, towering, glittering civilization, might be just one version of the human story. And maybe not the final one. Chapter 4. Remembering the other way. We've been told there's no alternative, that the way we live now is the only way modern life can function. That cities, markets, currencies, borders, clocks, careers, all of it, are permanent fixtures of human existence. But history tells a different story. Anthropology tells a different story. Beneath the noise of the present, another rhythm still hums. Older, softer, slower. A memory carried in the bones, not books. For tens of thousands of years, humans lived in societies that didn't look like this, that weren't built on endless production, extraction, and hierarchy. There were forager societies that moved with the land, not against it. Cultures that valued sharing over hoarding, storytelling over scheduling, presence over productivity. Not utopias. No system is perfect, but models of life shaped around cooperation and balance, not domination. And while those ways of living were largely pushed to the margins by the agricultural explosion and the empires it birthed, traces still remain. In indigenous communities, in decentralized tribes, in spiritual traditions that honor the land, in resistance movements that refuse to accept the logic of more at any cost. The mistake of modern civilization wasn't building, it was forgetting. Forgetting that there are other ways to relate to time, to work, to nature, to each other. And if forgetting got us here, maybe remembering is the way forward. Not to rewind the clock, but to recover the wisdom buried beneath the asphalt. What would it mean to design systems around enoughness instead of excess? To treat forests not as resources but as relatives? To teach children not just facts, but how to sit in silence with the wind, to create economies that serve people instead of people who serve economies. These aren't just poetic ideas. They're practical questions, because right now we're facing crises that the old script can't solve. Climate breakdown, mental health collapse, social atomization, political decay. We can't keep patching the same system and calling it innovation. We need to look upstream to the root assumptions we've inherited. That control is better than flow. That ownership is better than access. That faster is always better. What if we flipped those? What if slowness is sacred? What if rest is resistance? What if the goal isn't to conquer the earth, but to belong to it again? These aren't easy shifts. They require imagination, courage, and most dangerously of all, unlearning. Because unlearning forces us to confront the deepest fear planted by civilization, that without its structure, we will collapse. That chaos waits outside the fence. But maybe that's the greatest lie we've ever told ourselves. Maybe the collapse isn't outside. Maybe it's already inside, hidden beneath our polished surfaces. Maybe the burnout, the loneliness, the endless scrolling, the gnawing emptiness are not individual failures, but symptoms of a system that doesn't fit what we are. Because we were never designed for this pace, this pressure, this disconnection. We were made for firelight and laughter, for shared meals and open skies, for slowness and stillness and struggle together. And if that's true, if even a part of us remembers, then we can begin again. Not by abandoning everything, but by questioning everything. By planting different kinds of seeds. Community gardens, worker cooperatives, time, banks, local councils, rituals of slowness, new myths, old wisdom, small acts, subversive acts, not because they'll topple the whole machine overnight, but because they remind us that we're not machines, that we are still human, that we can still choose. And maybe that's what chapter 4 of our story could be. Not a collapse, not a revolution, but a return not to the past, but to our deeper nature, a reconnection to the long-forgotten truth that we don't have to live like this, that the system we're in is not a law of physics, it's just a story. And stories can change,